Step into the haunting world of forgotten photographs, where each image holds a secret waiting to be uncovered. What if we could unravel those stories together? Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind moments captured in time. In England during the 1930s, a peculiar and rather objectionable custom came to light, which elicited quite a number of reactions. His fellow urban dwellers, the mothers in particular, started hanging their babies in metal cribs outside their windows so as to get some fresh air. These small wire cages were fastened on the walls of some buildings, sometimes several stories high, and the babies were left dangling in them. This was done with high expectations that fresh air was good for their health and development, though the sight was really appalling. These cages were intended to enable the children to have a breath of fresh air, exercise, and be protected from the busy activities on the streets below. During a period when the air was saturated with chemicals and children grew up in homes filled with other children, some parents believed this to be their only choice. However, it began to attract negative attention due to the clearly identifiable risks of hanging babies up that high. Their practice rose to fame by the end of the decade. However, this attracted authorities' attention and hence banned. This strange chapter in the history of development could be seen as the demonstration of the development of the concept of safety and the needs of the child during early 20th century parenting. There was a unique event that occurred in the year 1951 at the Palisades Amusement Park in New Jersey, known as the Beautiful Leg Contest. This event was a part of a big amusement park celebration, and one of the peculiar aspects of the performance was that women dancing there had their heads covered with pillowcases. This made it possible to direct the attention of the judges to their legs only. It was a rather frivolous, somewhat whimsical show in which women presented themselves before the spectators. Their legs were being admired for their aesthetic appeal and aristocratic form. Although this type of thinking might seem bizarre in the present day, it was typical in the early years after World War II, especially throughout the 50s, when people became conscious about beauty and appearance. In the post-World War II period, the American people, coming out of a period of rationing and sacrifice, reveled in a new era of entertainment that exuded glamour and allure. Despite the brief period in the status of the competition, the identified contest represents examples of how beauty pageants and contests in the mid-20th century focused on physical characteristics in a rather peculiar manner. This highlights the transformation in the social setup and how beauty standards have been shaped, especially for women in our society. In 1922, Washington, D.C. was seen as very prudish when it came to beach fashion, and it was the beach policeman's Bill Norton duty to make sure that swimmers were not showing too much skin. The way he implemented this was quite strange and misogynistic. He used a ruler to determine the space between women's knees and their trunks. The idea was to avoid swimsuits that were as provocative as the culture of the period allowed or mandated. At a time when women's behavior was strictly regulated and beauty standards were extremely high, such regulations were effective for decency purposes. This practice can be related to the overall cultural representations of the early 20th century, where the cultural option of the flapper era has given women some sort of liberty, but that liberty was eyed suspiciously. Rules of wearing swimsuits were an attempt to regulate the perceived wildness of the female body in public spaces. Although such an event is ludicrous today, it raises the issue of conflict between the freedom of self-expression and the social expectations of decency, which is still controversial in the modern world, about elongated modesty and body-shaming advertisements. In the year 1910, roller skates, which retained pedals and wheels, were invented, and it is something that can hardly be overlooked by anybody. This invention was also an attempt at merging the fun of cycling and skating, as the design for this wheel was far from perfect. Although rather innovative, it was inconvenient when pedals were added, and the general functionality of the device did not live up to expectations. The skates were difficult to steer and caused discomfort to the users. This rendered them different from what the inventor had intended. Nonetheless, this early attempt at roller skates was one of the first steps towards a viable form of personal transport. It illustrates why inventors, over many generations, have always looked for methods to combine the functions of utility with leisure. While this specific design was not continued, it was the precursor to further developments that provided the blueprint for the contemporary roller skate. Thus, by reading this story, the readers are forced to admit that failure is not a rarity, and it is often followed by something greater in the field of technology. During the First World War, a rather touching picture of desperation can be seen in 1917, when a French Red Cross dog was fitted with a gas mask. Gassing was one of which was a horrifying weapon during the war, and the poisoning of the gases was not only dangerous to human beings and other animals that were used during the war. This particular dog used in delivering messages or supplies was an integral part of the team. It yet was shielded from the poisonous effects of the gases by a specially designed mask that was worn on its face. With that image of the dog wearing the mask, there is a glimpse of the trials of the war affecting every living creature, the creature of humans and the humans themselves. It also reminds us of how desperate people were to stay alive at any cost, including their loyal animals. This moment is a reflection of the fact that life goes on, and people who come together during war develop strong friendships. In the summer of 1942, Hollywood raised their interest in animals in cinemas to another level by inviting black cats to audition. This was no ordinary part. The cats were auditions for, get this, the black cat, which is based on another popular Victorian obsession, the occult. The color black was always generally linked with danger or witchcraft, which is why black cats became ideal candidates for use in a suspenseful, mysterious story. Of course, it is funny now, but this casting notice shows how much post-war American culture was steeped in symbolism and superstition, especially when it came to the movie genres of film noirs and horror. Mainly, animals were used as important characters in the plot, such as cats that made the idea of fate and fear, the supernatural and powerful. The simple casting of black cats in the movie serves as a reminder of how Hollywood has always aimed at triggering an emotional atmosphere and creating memorable experiences out of the seemingly mundane. It also relates to the overstressed effort that studios were willing to make in guaranteeing a film's success, if it, in fact, meant conducting auditions of four-legged actors. Martin Frank, in 1965, had taken a very symbolic photograph of children climbing a spiral staircase at a newly constructed library for children in Clamart, France. That photograph, to her, was much more than just the candids or a souvenir. It was the promise of a new, innovative, and imaginative approach to the growth and development of libraries. The staircase, delicate and spiraling, looked like the act of learning itself, climbing upwards to discovery and wisdom. This picture depicts post-war France, where small green spaces for children started to be recreated in order to be more lively and welcoming for kids. A library that has the appearance of a modern installation with open spaces where knowledge is cultivated with curiosity. It is not only in the photo of Frank that it is possible to observe the physical environment, but also the dreams associated with libraries in the minds of youth. It is a testament to the fact that learning through education, especially from public places, plays a very influential role in the lives of young people to improve their learning as well as their creativity in their dreams as they look forward to the future. Kangaroo boxing was another one of the quirkier forms of fighting that emerged in the last of the millennium, and one would almost consider this to be similar to something from a cartoon. The uncanny performance was to teach kangaroos to fight people or other animals, or simply play boxing matches, which could be performed at circuses or other shows. It was a kind of entertainment that made the audience chuckle and gag at the same time, seeing these mighty and muscled creatures act like pugilists. Where something that people today may consider as mere childish play, such as kangaroo boxing, it is a relevant illustration of the fact that earlier generations used to engage in the use of animals in various forms of entertainment roles without bothering even to consider whether the animals used were comfortable with the roles assigned to them or if they were endangering their safety. The practice was prohibited in the later years due to violation of the rights of the animals, since the fights themselves were not natural to kangaroos. This paper explores the case of kangaroo boxing rising and falling as an example of how entertainment develops and as an indicator of shifts within society and a growing awareness of animal rights. There is a really bright photo which was taken in the 1960s, where the master of dark cinema, Alfred Hitchcock, is portrayed as having tea with a lion. Cultivating suspense as one of the primary elements in his movies, Hitchcock was always interested in playing with tension and suspense, be it on the big screen or behind the scenes. In this image, one may easily be pardoned to think that this picture is staged to the last degree. A great director, an eminent master of suspense and horror thrillers, calmly sitting next to a lion that may potentially attack at any moment. This is Hitchcock to the bone, the man who enjoyed life to the fullest and was always ready to create a scandal or confuse the audience as much as possible to get the desired effect. This was particularly so at a time when Hollywood was awash with glamour and had become synonymous with spectacle, which made this image an embodiment of the quirkiness that Hitchcock was known for. It also suggests risk and the unknown, which are typical of the themes in his movies, also present in this poster. Thus, the photograph serves as a posthumous tribute to Hitchcock and his life, as well as an illustration that in the master's world the truth was never ordinary and always intertwined with artistic creation. Old Halloween dresses that were used in the early 1900s are good examples of how this entertainment was embraced long before the prevailing wholesale costumes of today, created from scraps of fabric and humble items such as burlap, cardboard, and fabric. These were eerie, at times shocking in their appearance. The fairy tales depicted apparitions, bones, and witches. However, the living were not as developed as in current TV shows and movies. It can be noted that by the years 1910 to 1920, Halloween started gaining more popularity in the USA, though the tradition still retained the atmosphere of mystique and fear. The costumes, which were made out of material bought at local stores or made at home by the families, are unbelievable in the way they managed to represent such a creative period in history. It's important to remember that they were not made for fame or business, just for the thrill of making friends jump and overall for the holiday spookiness. These old-time costumes sum up the less commercial and more engaging style of Halloween customs, as people focus more on their fellow men, the artistry of their costumes, and the anticipation. It shows that traditions change while the idea of Halloween, a little bit of fear and a lot of fun, does not. After the year 1939, Montreal women prepared to encounter winter snowstorms. As such, they wore plastic headgear to protect them. Such protective clothing represented the ingenuity of people in the period when blizzards could be particularly severe, and the measures adopted were not necessarily complex, but realistic. The plastic headgear served to shield hair and faces from snow, which would otherwise dampen them as they moved through the snowy roads. This unique approach emphasizes the difficulties of living in Montreal during the cold winter, when snowstorms were a natural occurrence. It also highlights how the people survived in the ancient world, how they considered the environment and how they made do with what they had, unlike today's society, where everything is easy and convenient. The depiction of women wearing plastic cap-like accessories suggests that creativity is always born out of compulsion, and sometimes the mundane solutions devised can form a part of our lives and influence how we solve different problems. Thank you for revealing the stills of the past with us. If you enjoyed this story, you'll love these. Remember, behind every still, a story unfolds.